I arrived at Pier 59 restaurant at exactly 7:30, wearing my best suit, carrying a wedding gift that would change my son's life forever. The maitre d' looked confused when I approached the hostess stand. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" "Henderson's wedding party," I said. "I'm the father of the groom." She checked her book twice. "Sir, I'm sorry, but we don't have any wedding events scheduled tonight." That's when I saw John emerge from the bar area, straightening his tie, checking his watch. Our eyes met across the empty dining room. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he walked over, and I noticed something I'd never seen before, genuine fear in my son's eyes. "Dad," he said quietly, "what are you doing here?" "Your wedding, John, 7:30 tonight, same as we discussed 6 months ago." He looked at the floor, then back at me. "Dad, we had it yesterday. 3 decades of raising him alone. 3 decades of working double shifts to pay for his education. 3 decades of saving every penny for this moment, and he'd stolen it from me with a single word. Yesterday. We had to change the date," John continued, his voice getting smaller. "Victoria's family had scheduling conflicts. It was last minute, very small ceremony." I reached into my jacket pocket and felt the envelope. The wedding gift I'd planned to present during my father of the groom toast. A cashier's check for $1 million money that suddenly felt very different in my hands. "I see." I kept the envelope in my pocket. "Well, John, I guess congratulations are in order. Dad, I wanted to tell you, but you didn't. Checkmate comes when the pawn reveals it was always the king. This story has more reversals than a Manhattan elevator, and it starts with a security guard who just learned exactly what his generosity is worth to his son." I turned to leave, the check still safely in my pocket. If you've ever been underestimated by someone you love, you'll want to hear what happened next. Because what my son didn't know about his father would destroy everything he thought he knew about his own life. For 30 years, I've worn the same uniform to work. Navy blue shirt, black pants, Henderson security badge clipped to my chest. Head of security at Manhattan Financial Tower, 432 Park Avenue. I arrive at 5:30 every morning, make my rounds, and check the overnight logs. Simple job. Honest work. The kind of job that keeps a man humble and teaches him how money really moves in this city. John never liked explaining what his father did for a living. When he was 12, career day came around. Other kids brought in doctors, lawyers, executives in expensive suits. John told his teacher I was in building management. Close enough, I suppose. I managed to keep buildings safe. I managed to keep my family fed. I managed to save every penny I could for his future. His mother left when he was 15. Said she married beneath herself. Needed someone with ambition. I never fought her for custody. John needed stability, not lawyers. But watching your ex-wife convince your teenage son that his father's not good enough, that cuts deep. It cuts deeper when you start to see that same look in your son's eyes. College came and went. John studied marketing at NYU. Good grades, good internship, good job after graduation. Marketing coordinator at some downtown firm. I was proud. He wore suits now, carried a briefcase, talked about client relations and brand positioning. Everything I couldn't give him, he was building for himself. The girlfriend appeared 2 years ago. Victoria Ashworth. Old money family from Boston. The kind of name that opens doors, the kind of background that makes people listen. John lit up when he talked about her family's connections, their social circle, their influence in the right places. He'd found his ticket to the world he thought he deserved. But something changed after Victoria. John stopped calling as much, stopped visiting for Sunday dinner. When we did talk, he seemed nervous, always checking his phone, always cutting conversations short. Last Christmas, he didn't invite me to her family's gathering. "It's just immediate family," he said. "You understand?" I understood more than he knew. I had no idea how deep his shame ran. Standing in that empty restaurant, holding my speech for the father of the groom toast, I realized the months of distance made sense now. John had been planning this for a while. The slow fade, the canceled dinners, the last-minute changes to holiday plans. He'd been editing me out of his life one conversation at a time. My phone buzzed. Text message from John. "Sorry, Dad. Victoria's family wanted something smaller. Hope you understand." I texted back, "I'd like to understand. Can we talk?" The typing dots appeared and disappeared 3 times before his response came. "Can't right now. Wedding night, you know? We'll catch up soon." Wedding night. at 7:30 on a Tuesday evening in a restaurant where no wedding had taken place. I looked around Pier 59 again. Nice place. The kind of venue that costs serious money. The kind of place you book months in advance, not somewhere you randomly decide to hold a last-minute ceremony. I walked to the bar and ordered a scotch. The bartender was polite, professional. "Celebrating something special tonight?" he asked. "My son's wedding," I said. "Apparently." He smiled, wiped down a glass. "Congratulations. Did they have the ceremony here?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." The bartender looked confused. "Sir, we haven't had a wedding here in 6 weeks. The Pemberton event was our last ceremony. Big affair, 300 guests. Trust me, I'd remember if we had another one yesterday." I finished my scotch in one swallow. John hadn't just excluded me from his wedding. He'd lied about where it happened. Which meant he'd lied about when it happened. Which meant everything about this situation was calculated, deliberate, planned. I pulled out my phone and dialed. John answered on the 4th ring. "Hey, Dad. Like I said, we're kind of busy right now. John, I'm at Pier 59. They didn't have a wedding here yesterday. They haven't had a wedding here in 6 weeks. Silence. Long enough for me to count my heartbeats. "Dad, look. It's complicated. Victoria's family. They have certain expectations. Where was your wedding, son?" "The Union Club. Victoria's family has been members for generations." "It was beautiful, Dad. Really. I wish you could have been there." The Union Club. Manhattan's oldest social club. The kind of place where memberships get passed down through bloodlines, where net worth gets measured in generations, not dollars. The kind of place that would never let a security guard through the front door, let alone seat him at the bride's family table. "I see," I said. "And when exactly did you decide to change the venue?" "It wasn't my choice, Dad. Victoria's grandfather insisted. Family tradition. You know how these old money families are about tradition. I knew exactly how old money families operated. I'd spent 30 years watching them in the buildings I protected. I'd learned their languages, their customs, their unspoken rules about who belonged and who didn't. What he said next destroyed everything I thought I knew about my son. Dad, I need you to understand something. Victoria's family, they're different from us. They have certain standards, certain expectations about the people in their circle. It's not personal. It's just how their world works. Their world. You know what I mean. The social expectations, the professional requirements. Her father's a federal judge. Her mother sits on the boards of 3 major charities. They move in circles where appearances matter. And I don't fit those appearances." "It's not about fitting in, Dad. It's about not standing out for the wrong reasons. Victoria's family needed to know that their daughter was marrying into stability, into respectability. Having a security guard at the head table sends a certain message. A security guard, not his father, not the man who raised him alone after his mother left, not the man who worked double shifts to pay for his college education. A security guard who embarrassed him. What message would that be, John? Dad, please don't make this harder than it already is. I love you. You know that. But Victoria's family has been part of Manhattan society for 4 generations. They have a reputation to maintain. They couldn't risk having their social circle wonder about our family's background. Our family's background. 30 years of honest work, of providing for my son, of building something real and lasting, and he called it a background to be ashamed of. I thought about the envelope in my jacket pocket, the wedding gift I'd planned to present during my father of the groom speech, a cashier's check for $1 million, the first installment of John's inheritance. So you solved their reputation problem by lying about the date and location. I solved it by giving everyone what they needed. Victoria's family got their perfect society wedding. You didn't have to sit through an uncomfortable evening where you felt out of place. Win-win. Win-win. My son had turned my exclusion from the most important day of his life into a favor he'd done for me. John, let me ask you something. How are you paying for all this? The Union Club, the reception, Victoria's ring. What do you mean? I mean, a marketing coordinator's salary doesn't usually cover Union Club weddings and what looked like a 3-carat engagement ring when you showed me the photos. Victoria's family contributed, and I've been saving. Saving what? You make what? $60,000 a year? After taxes, rent, student loans, car payments? What exactly have you been saving? Dad, I don't think that's really any of your business anymore. Anymore. As if my 30 years of financial support had an expiration date. As if the monthly transfers I'd been making to his account since he graduated college were somehow invisible, forgettable, irrelevant to his current lifestyle. I looked at my reflection in the restaurant's window. Same face I'd worn to work for 3 decades. Same hands that had signed the paperwork to set up his trust fund. Same heart that was breaking as I realized how completely my son had written me out of his new life. You're right, John. It's not my business anymore. I hung up. The bartender refilled my glass without being asked. Family trouble? Family revelation. What the private investigator's report would tell me about my son's new family would change everything. I've learned a few things from 30 years in security. First rule, when something doesn't add up, dig deeper. Second rule, when someone's hiding something, they usually leave traces. Third rule, money always leaves a trail. Thursday morning, I called Paul Richards, my estate attorney. We'd worked together for 15 years, setting up trusts, managing assets, planning for John's future. Paul knew numbers. More importantly, Paul knew how to find numbers. Shanley, good to hear from you. How was the wedding? Interesting question, Paul. That's actually why I'm calling. I need you to run some background checks. Financial profiles. Can you have Margaret Collins pull the building tenant records for me? Margaret Collins managed tenant relations for all 3 of my Manhattan properties. 20 years in commercial real estate, she knew every business lease, every rental agreement, every security deposit in our portfolio. If John was telling the truth about his downtown job, Margaret would have the details. What exactly are you looking for? Verification. My son claims he works for a marketing firm downtown. I want to confirm his employment, his salary, his financial capacity to afford his current lifestyle. Shanley, is everything all right? I told Paul about the wedding, the lies, the exclusion, the sudden lifestyle upgrade that didn't match John's supposed income. Paul listened without interrupting, taking notes like the lawyer he was. I'll need 48 hours, Paul said, for a complete financial profile, employment verification, and background check on the bride's family. If there are inconsistencies, we'll find them. There's something else, Paul. Victoria Ashworth, Boston family, old money. Federal judge father. I want to know if that story checks out. Consider it done. Shanley, I have to ask, how much have you been transferring to John monthly? $4,200. Every month since graduation. Automatic transfer. For how many years? 5 years. $252,000 total. Paul was quiet for a moment. And he's never asked about the source of those funds. Never. I told him it was from his education fund, money I'd saved over the years. He never questioned it. Shanley, a security guard's salary wouldn't typically allow for those kinds of monthly transfers. No, Paul, it wouldn't. Friday afternoon, Paul called back. The private investigator's report was ready. We met at his office on Lexington Avenue, 3 blocks from my building. Paul spread the documents across his conference table like evidence in a criminal case. Let's start with Victoria Ashworth, Paul said. Born Victoria Walsh in Dorchester, Massachusetts. Changed her name legally at 18. Father is Patrick Walsh, not a federal judge. He's a retired postal worker. Mother is deceased. No trust fund, no inheritance, no old money family connections. And the Ashworth name? Adopted from her stepfather when she was 12, Charles Ashworth. He's real money, but he divorced her mother when Victoria was 16. She has no legal claim to the Ashworth family assets. Paul flipped to the next page. Her financial profile is interesting. Credit cards maxed out. Student loans in default. But here's the curious part. She's been researching property ownership records in Manhattan. Specifically, your property ownership records. She knows? She knows you own 432 Park Avenue, 567 Lexington Avenue, and 789 Broadway. She knows the estimated values, the rental income, the commercial tenant base. She's done her homework, Shanley. The room felt smaller. Victoria hadn't just researched my buildings. She'd researched me, which meant this wasn't about John finding love. This was about John being found by someone who knew exactly what his father was worth. What about John's employment? Paul handed me another document. Jonathan Henderson, marketing coordinator at Pinnacle Media Group. Office address, 432 Park Avenue, 32nd floor. Monthly salary, $4,800. My building. My son worked in my building. The place I'd walked past his office door every morning for 2 years, never knowing he was there. The place where building management knew me as the owner, where security protocols required my approval, where tenant agreements crossed my desk monthly. Paul, does John know he works in my building? The lease agreement shows Pinnacle Media Group as a tenant since 2019. Your building management company handles day-to-day operations. Unless John specifically researched the property ownership or asked building management about the owner, he probably has no idea. I stared at the documents. My son had been 20 feet above my head every workday for 2 years. Same building, same elevator bank, same parking garage. He'd been accepting my money, working in my property, building a life with a woman who'd researched my net worth, and he had no idea who his father really was. There's one more thing, Shanley. The PI's report contained some interesting financial documents. The panic call came at 3:17 a.m. Saturday morning. I made a decision that would either fix my relationship with my son or end it permanently. I called First National Bank and placed a hold on all automatic transfers to John's account. Effective immediately, the $4,200 that had been arriving every month for 5 years would stop. Then I waited. Saturday passed quietly. Sunday morning, I attended church as I had every Sunday for 30 years. Sunday afternoon, I reviewed the PI's report again, memorizing details about Victoria's real background, John's employment, the building connections none of us had realized existed. Sunday evening, my phone rang. Dad, I think there's been some kind of banking error. My monthly transfer didn't come through. No error, John. I stopped the transfers. You what? Dad, you can't just stop them. I have bills, commitments. Victoria and I have plans. What kind of plans? We're looking at apartments, real estate in Manhattan, the kind of places that require significant down payments. I was counting on that money. Real estate in Manhattan, on a marketing coordinator's salary of $4,800 a month. Even with Victoria's supposed trust fund, they'd need substantial additional income to afford anything decent in the city. John, let's talk numbers. You make roughly $5,000 a month. After taxes, that's about $3,800 take-home. Rent, student loans, car payments, credit cards, food, insurance. What's left for Manhattan real estate down payments? Dad, that's really not your concern anymore. It became my concern when you made it clear that our relationship has conditions. When you decided that including me in your life depends on whether I embarrass you or not. That's not fair. You're making this about something it's not. What is it about, John? It's about building a life with Victoria. It's about moving into the kind of social and professional circles where we can really succeed. It's about not being held back by associations that don't help us move forward. Associations. He was talking about me like I was a professional liability, a networking problem to be managed. John, where exactly do you work? I told you. Downtown. Pinnacle Media Group. Why? What's the address? Dad, why are you asking all these questions? Are you checking up on me? The address, John. 432 Park Avenue, 32nd floor. But I don't see why that matters. I sat back in my chair. He had no idea. After 2 years of working in my building, taking elevators I maintained, walking through lobbies I secured, accessing parking garages I managed, he had absolutely no idea that his father owned the place where he worked every day. John, I need to tell you something about that building. What about it? I own it. The silence lasted exactly 11 seconds. I counted. Dad, that's not funny. I also own 567 Lexington Avenue and 789 Broadway. 3 commercial properties in Manhattan. Total estimated value $127 million. Dad, stop it. You're a security guard. You can't afford to own buildings in Manhattan. I'm head of security for buildings I own. I've been investing in Manhattan real estate for 30 years. Every penny I could save, every bonus, every tax refund went into property acquisition. I started small, a rundown building in 1995, fixed it up, rented it out, used the income to buy the next one. You're serious, dead serious. The monthly transfers you've been receiving, that's rental income from your trust fund. The trust fund I established when you graduated college, the trust fund that owns a percentage of my real estate portfolio.
John's breathing became audible over the phone. Dad, if that's true, why didn't you ever tell me? Because I wanted you to work for your success. I wanted you to understand the value of earning your own way. I wanted you to respect the kind of work that builds real wealth over time. But if you're really worth that much money, why do you still work as a security guard? Because that's how I learned to understand money, John, by protecting it.
By watching how people with real wealth behave versus how people who want to appear wealthy behave. By learning the difference between having money and showing off money. Dad, I don't understand. If you're worth over $100 million, why didn't you just pay for everything? Why make me struggle? Why let me think we were just ordinary people? Because extraordinary wealth in the hands of ordinary character creates ordinary disasters. I wanted you to develop character first, wealth second. And now? Now I discover that you're ashamed of the work that created the wealth you've been living on. Now I discover that you'd rather lie to your wife about your father than explain how a security guard managed to become a millionaire. Now I discover that you care more about what Victoria's fake elite family thinks than about what your real father has actually accomplished. The phone went quiet again. When John spoke, his voice was different, smaller. Dad, Victoria's family isn't fake elite. John, Victoria's not even her real name. She was born Victoria Walsh in Dorchester. Her father's a retired postal worker. She legally changed her name to Ashworth when she was 18. There is no trust fund. There is no old money. There is no federal judge father. She researched my property holdings before she started dating you. The sound that came through the phone wasn't words. It was the sound of a young man's entire worldview collapsing in real time. Then Victoria dropped her own bomb. John, who are you talking to? Victoria's voice came through the phone speaker. She was close enough to hear both sides of our conversation. My father, Victoria, he's saying some really strange things about your family background. What kind of things? Her voice had changed, sharper, more alert. He says your real name is Victoria Walsh. He says your father's not a federal judge. I heard Victoria take the phone from John. Mr. Henderson, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Victoria. I had you investigated. Born Victoria Walsh, Dorchester, Massachusetts. Father Patrick Walsh, retired postal worker. You legally changed your name to Ashworth at 18 when your stepfather divorced your mother. No trust fund, no inheritance, no family connections to old money Boston society. Mr. Henderson, I think you've been given some very bad information. I also know you spent 3 months researching my property holdings before you met my son. You know I own 3 buildings in Manhattan worth a combined $127 million. You know about the monthly transfers to John's account. You know exactly who you're dealing with. Victoria's silence was different from John's. His had been shock and confusion. Hers was calculation. Mr. Henderson, even if some of those details were accurate, what exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that you targeted my son because you discovered his father was wealthy. I'm suggesting that your entire relationship is based on financial research, not romantic interest. I'm suggesting that excluding me from the wedding was part of a plan to isolate John from his family while you secured access to his inheritance. That's a very serious accusation. It's a very serious situation. John, are you listening to this? Dad, I'm here, but this is crazy. Victoria loves me. We're married now. These conspiracy theories don't change anything. John, let me ask you something. What did Victoria tell you about my financial situation when you first started dating? She said you seemed like a hard-working man who probably had some savings put away for retirement. And what did she suggest when you told her about the monthly transfers from me? She said it was sweet that you were helping me get started in life, but that we shouldn't depend on family money long-term. She said we needed to build our own wealth, our own independence. While researching exactly how much family money was available to not depend on, Victoria's voice returned. Mr. Henderson, I resent the implication that my relationship with your son is anything other than genuine. John and I love each other. We're building a life together based on shared values and mutual respect. What values would those be, Victoria? Family values, professional achievement, social responsibility. Family values like excluding fathers from weddings, professional achievement like living on money you didn't earn, social responsibility like lying about your background to everyone you meet. Mr. Henderson, I think this conversation has become quite hostile. John and I are newlyweds trying to start our marriage in a positive environment. These attacks on my character aren't helping anyone. John, I want you to listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. The monthly transfers have stopped. Permanently. The trust fund I established for you has new conditions. If you want access to your inheritance, you'll need to demonstrate that you understand the difference between real values and social climbing. Dad, you can't just cut me off. I'm your son. You're my son when you act like one. You're my son when you include me in the important moments of your life. You're my son when you're proud of the work that built the wealth you've been living on. Victoria's voice became sharp. Mr. Henderson, if you think you can manipulate John by threatening his financial security, you're mistaken. We don't need your money. John has his own career, his own income. We can build our own future. On a marketing coordinator's salary of $4,800 a month? John makes more than that. John, what's your actual monthly salary at Pinnacle Media Group? Dad, why are you asking about specific numbers? Because your wife just lied about your income. Because she's been lying about everything since the day she met you. Because I want you to understand exactly what kind of person you married. I heard muffled conversation on their end. Victoria talking quickly, urgently. John responding with confusion, questions. Then Victoria's voice returned. Clearer, more controlled. Mr. Henderson, I think we need to have a face-to-face conversation. This phone call isn't the right format for these kinds of discussions. Why don't you come to our apartment? We can sort all of this out like adults. What's your address? Chelsea Harbor, 567 Lexington Avenue. Apartment 4, B. 567 Lexington Avenue. My building. They were living in my building. John had been accepting money from his father, working in his father's building, and now living in his father's building, while excluding his father from his life because his father's work embarrassed him. John, do you know who owns your apartment building? Of course, some management company. Chelsea Harbor Properties, I think. Why? I own 567 Lexington Avenue, John. You're living in my building. You work in my building. You've been spending my money while living in my properties and working in my real estate. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had disconnected. Then John's voice, barely audible. Dad, that can't be true. Building management can confirm it. Margaret Collins, tenant relations. She can show you the ownership documents, the lease agreements, the property management contracts. Everything. Victoria's voice, now with an edge of panic. Mr. Henderson, if you think you can use property ownership to control our living situation, you're mistaken. We have tenant rights, legal protections. Victoria, you're absolutely right. You have tenant rights, but landlords also have rights, including the right to know exactly who's living in their properties and how they're paying their rent. I realized I was fighting more than shame. Monday morning brought a phone call I wasn't expecting. Law offices of Bradley, Martinez, and Associates. Victoria had hired an attorney. Mr. Henderson, this is Jennifer Bradley. I represent Victoria and Jonathan Henderson regarding some family matters. I understand there's been some conflict over financial arrangements and property access. Miss Bradley, what exactly is the nature of this conflict? My clients are concerned about potential harassment and financial coercion. Mrs. Henderson feels that you're using your claimed property ownership and financial resources to intimidate them into accepting your presence in their marriage. Claimed property ownership. Victoria was betting that a security guard couldn't actually own Manhattan real estate, that my claims were bluffs designed to manipulate John. Miss Bradley, your clients live in a building I own, and John works in another building I own. These aren't claims. These are documented facts. Would you like copies of the property deeds? Mr. Henderson, my clients also want to discuss potential alienation of affection. Alienation of affection? The tort of alienation of affection allows a spouse to sue a third party who interfered with their marriage relationship. Your actions threatening to cut off financial support, making unsubstantiated claims about Mrs. Henderson's background, attempting to control their living situation through property ownership. These behaviors constitute intentional interference with their marital relationship. Alienation of affection. Victoria was threatening to sue me for alienating my own son's affections. The irony was almost perfect. The The woman who had systematically alienated John from his father was now claiming that his father was alienating him from her. Miss Bradley, let me make sure I understand. Your client married my son, excluded me from the wedding, lied about her background, researched my financial assets before beginning the relationship, and is now threatening to sue me for trying to maintain a relationship with my own child. Mr. Henderson, those are serious allegations that would require substantial proof. What my clients have is documented evidence of your threatening behavior, your financial coercion, and your attempts to control their living situation. What kind of documented evidence? Phone recordings of your conversations, email records of your financial threats, witness statements about your harassment of Mrs. Henderson. Victoria had been recording our phone calls. She documented every conversation, every financial decision, every attempt I'd made to understand what was happening with my son. She was building a legal case against me while I was trying to build a relationship with him. Miss Bradley, I'd like to see this documented evidence. Mr. Henderson, we're prepared to file suit unless you agree to cease all contact with my clients and restore their previous financial arrangements. Mrs. Henderson is prepared to testify that your behavior has caused severe emotional distress, that your financial threats have created an atmosphere of intimidation, and that your property ownership claims are attempts to control their personal lives. And if I don't agree to those terms? We'll file for a restraining order preventing you from contacting my clients, accessing their building, or interfering with their financial independence. We'll also pursue damages for emotional distress, harassment, and alienation of affection. I hung up and immediately called Paul Richards. Paul, I need you to prepare a complete legal defense package. Property ownership documents, financial records, trust fund documentation, employment verification for John, background check results for Victoria. Everything we've gathered, organized for court presentation. Shanley, what's happened? I told Paul about the attorney's call, the alienation of affection threat, the recorded conversations, the restraining order. This is actually good news, Paul said. How is this good news? Because she's forcing us into a legal arena where facts matter more than emotions. If she wants to claim that your property ownership is fake, we can prove it's real. If she wants to claim that her background is legitimate, we can prove it's not. If she wants to claim alienation of affection, we can prove that she's the one who systematically separated John from his family. What about the recorded conversations? New York is a one-party consent state. If she recorded conversations she was part of, that's legal. But recording conversations gives us something too, evidence of exactly what was said, when it was said, and in what context. Paul, I need you to do something else. I want to restructure John's trust fund. New conditions, new requirements, new legal framework. What kind of conditions? Performance-based inheritance. John gets access to his trust fund in stages based on demonstrable respect for family relationships, honest employment, and genuine understanding of financial responsibility. Shanley, that's legally complex. Trust modifications require specific procedures, beneficiary notifications, court approvals in some cases. Do whatever's necessary. If Victoria wants to play legal games, we'll play legal games, but we'll play them with a full deck. Tuesday afternoon, I implemented my own recording strategy. If Victoria was documenting our conversations, I would document everything too. Legal, ethical, and necessary for protecting both John and myself from further manipulation. I called John's office directly. Pinnacle Media Group, 32nd floor, 432 Park Avenue. My building. John Henderson, please? May I ask who's calling? This is Shanley Henderson, building owner. I need to discuss a tenant matter with Mr. Henderson. One moment, please. John's voice, when he came on the line, was careful, guarded. Dad, why are you calling me at work? Because I want you to understand something very clearly, John. You work in my building. Every day you take an elevator I maintain, walk through a lobby I secure, park in a garage I own. Every month, your employer pays rent to a company I control. You've been 5 floors below my office for 2 years, and you never knew it. Dad, I don't understand why you're telling me this. Because your wife hired an attorney to threaten me with alienation of affection. Because she's claiming I'm trying to control your life through fake property ownership. because she's betting that a security guard couldn't possibly own Manhattan real estate. Dad, Victoria's just trying to protect our marriage. John, who does she think she's protecting it from? From interference, from family drama, from complications that might hurt our relationship. John, I am your family. I raised you alone after your mother left. I worked 60-hour weeks to pay for your education. I set up a trust fund to secure your future. I've been supporting you financially for 5 years, and your wife considers that interference? The recording device was already rolling. Wednesday morning, I met with Paul Richards and Margaret Collins at my office in 432 Park Avenue. 32nd floor. 1 floor above where my son worked every day without knowing his father owned the building.
Margaret, I need you to pull all documentation related to the Pinnacle Media Group lease. Rental agreements, payment history, tenant communications, everything. Margaret spread the files across my conference table. Shanley, Pinnacle has been a model tenant. Monthly rent of $42,000, always on time, no complaints, no violations. Their lease runs through December 2025. What about employee access records? Do we track who works for our tenants? Security protocols require employee registration for building access cards. I have the complete Pinnacle employee list. She handed me a sheet with 37 names. Jonathan Henderson was number 14 on the list. 2 years of daily building access. 2 years of employee security clearance. 2 years of working in a building owned by his father while claiming his father embarrassed him. Paul reviewed the trust fund modifications we'd prepared. Shanley, this is comprehensive.
Performance-based inheritance tied to specific behavioral requirements. Respect for family relationships, honest communication, financial transparency, genuine employment verification. What are the legal requirements for implementing these changes? Beneficiary notification, 30-day review period, opportunity for legal challenge. But since you're the trust creator and John is the sole beneficiary, modification is relatively straightforward. And if Victoria's attorney tries to challenge the trust restructure, she has no legal standing. She's not a beneficiary, not a trust creator, not a legal heir. Her marriage to John doesn't give her rights to challenge trust terms. Margaret looked up from the building records. Shanley, there's something interesting in the Pinnacle files. They've submitted 3 lease modification requests in the past 6 months, all requesting upgraded office space, expanded square footage, premium location within the building. On what basis? Growing business, increased client base, expanded employee roster, but their rental payments haven't changed. Standard lease terms don't allow for space upgrades without proportional rent increases. Paul examined the lease modification requests. Shanley, these requests are unusual. Most growing businesses expect to pay more for better space. Pinnacle seems to expect upgrades without additional cost. As if they expect special treatment? Exactly. As if they believe building management owes them favorable consideration for reasons that aren't specified in these documents. I realized what was happening. John had been dropping hints about his father in building management. Not direct claims about ownership, but suggestions that his family had connections, influences, reasons why Pinnacle Media Group deserved special consideration. He'd been using his father's position to seek advantages at work, while simultaneously excluding his father from his personal life. Margaret, I want you to schedule a building management meeting with Pinnacle Media Group. Standard lease review, routine tenant check-in. I want to observe how John behaves when he thinks he's dealing with building management versus when he knows he's dealing with his father. When should I schedule it? Friday afternoon. And Margaret, I want you to prepare a complete building ownership disclosure packet. Property deeds, management structure, ownership hierarchy, everything that shows exactly who controls this building. Paul reviewed the legal framework we'd established. Shanley, if this meeting goes the way I think it will, you'll have documented evidence of John's behavior in a professional context, his expectations of special treatment, his willingness to leverage family connections when it benefits him while rejecting those same connections when they don't. And Victoria's alienation of affection case. If John has been using your position to gain workplace advantages while claiming you embarrass him socially, that demonstrates that he understands the value of your professional standing. It becomes very difficult to argue that maintaining a relationship with you is harmful when he's actively benefiting from that relationship in his career. Thursday afternoon, Victoria called me directly. No attorney, no intermediary, no legal threats. Mr. Henderson, I think we need to talk. That's when she made her fatal mistake. Mr. Henderson, I owe you an apology. Victoria's voice was different, softer, more vulnerable than I'd heard before. What kind of apology, Victoria? I think I've been reacting out of fear instead of understanding. John told me about the building ownership, about the trust fund, about the monthly transfers. I didn't realize the extent of your financial success, and I'm embarrassed about how I've handled this situation. The recording device was running. Single-party consent in New York meant everything she said would be legally admissible. What specifically are you apologizing for? For excluding you from the wedding, for not encouraging John to be honest about our concerns, for hiring an attorney instead of trying to work things out as a family. And what concerns were those, Victoria? Well, to be completely honest, I was worried about the social dynamics. My family has certain expectations about the social circles we move in, and I wasn't sure how to integrate someone from a working-class background into our family events. Your family's expectations? Yes, my father's position as a federal judge, my mother's charity work, our family's standing in Boston society. These things create certain social obligations. I was trying to protect everyone from potentially awkward situations. She was doubling down on the lies. Even after I told her I knew about her real background, she was maintaining the fiction about her father, the federal judge, her mother's charity work, her family's Boston society standing. Victoria, tell me about your father's judicial appointment. What court does he serve on? The Federal District Court for Massachusetts. He's been on the bench for 12 years, very respected in legal circles. And your mother's charity work? She sits on the boards of the Boston Children's Hospital Foundation, the Massachusetts Historical Society, and the Back Bay Cultural Commission, very active in philanthropic circles. Victoria, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. Do you know who I really am? Of course I know who you are. You're John's father. You work in building security. You've been very generous with financial support. Do you know what I'm worth? John mentioned that you've done well with investments, that you've been able to help him financially. I assume you've saved wisely over the years. She was playing dumb, pretending she hadn't researched my property holdings, hadn't discovered my net worth, hadn't targeted John specifically because of his father's wealth. Victoria, I own the building where John works. I own the building where you live. I own 3 commercial properties in Manhattan worth a combined $127 million. Mr. Henderson, that's incredible. John never told me the full extent of your success. Because John doesn't know. He's been working in my building for 2 years without realizing his father owns it. Oh my God, that means you're actually wealthy. Yes. The kind of wealthy that would make me a very attractive father-in-law for someone interested in financial security. Mr. Henderson, I hope you don't think that my interest in John has anything to do with money. I love your son. I married him because I love him. Victoria, what's your real name? Silence. Victoria, what's your father's real profession? Longer silence. Victoria, where did you grow up? Mr. Henderson, I'm not sure why you're asking these questions. Because I had you investigated. Because I know you were born Victoria Walsh in Dorchester, Massachusetts. Because I know your father, Patrick Walsh, is a retired postal worker, not a federal judge. Because I know you have no trust fund, no inheritance, no family connections to Boston society. The silence stretched until I wondered if she'd hung up. Victoria, are you there? Yes, I'm here. I also know you spent 3 months researching my financial background before you started dating John. I know you found records of my property ownership, my business holdings, my net worth. I know you targeted my son because you discovered his father was wealthy. Mr. Henderson, that's not true. Then explain to me how a woman with maxed out credit cards, defaulted student loans, and no legitimate family money managed to convince my son that she was old money Boston society? I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding was mine, Victoria. I underestimated how thoroughly you'd researched my family before deciding to become part of it. I underestimated how completely you'd manipulated my son into believing your background was real. Mr. Henderson, please. John and I are married now. We love each other. These details about my background don't change the fact that we want to build a life together. What kind of life, Victoria? Based on what foundation? Based on love? Based on commitment? Based on sharing our futures? Sharing your future with his inheritance, you mean? That's not fair. Victoria Walsh from Dorchester, Massachusetts, daughter of postal worker Patrick Walsh. Tell me what's fair about lying to my son about everything from your name to your family background to your financial situation. But the final twist was still coming. Mr. Henderson, you're right. I lied about my background. But there's something you don't understand about John, something he's never told you. What would that be? He knows who you are. He's always known. The words hit like a physical blow. Victoria, what are you talking about? John figured out you owned his building 6 months ago. Building management sent him a lease renewal notice with Henderson Properties listed as the ownership company. He researched the connection, found the property records, discovered your net worth. That's impossible. John never said anything. Because he didn't know how to handle it. He'd been taking your money for years while being embarrassed about your job. Then he discovers you're worth over $100 million, and suddenly everything he thought he knew about his life was wrong. If John knew I owned his building, why didn't he tell me? Because he was ashamed. Not ashamed of your wealth. Ashamed of how he'd treated you. Ashamed of being embarrassed by the most successful person he'd ever known. Ashamed of excluding you from our lives while living off your generosity. I sat down heavily. If John had known about my wealth for 6 months, then everything about the wedding exclusion was different. It wasn't about shame over his father's working-class job. It was about guilt over his own behavior. Victoria, if John knew I was wealthy, why did you exclude me from the wedding? Because John was terrified you'd cut him off once you realized he knew. He thought if he could just maintain the status quo, keep pretending he didn't know, you'd never have to confront how he'd been treating you. And you encouraged this? Mr. Henderson, I encouraged it because I was scared too. Scared that if John told you the truth, you'd realize he'd been taking advantage of your generosity while being ashamed of you. Scared that you'd cut us both off and leave us with nothing. So you decided to manage the situation by excluding me from the most important day of my son's life. We decided to postpone the confrontation until we could figure out how to handle it. The wedding was supposed to be a small ceremony, just immediate family, while we worked out how to repair your relationship with John. By lying about the date and location. By giving ourselves time to find the right way to tell you that John knows the truth about your wealth and feels terrible about how he's treated you. I looked out my office window at the Manhattan skyline. Buildings I owned, businesses I'd built, wealth I'd accumulated over 30 years of careful investment and hard work. And my son had known about it for 6 months while continuing to exclude me from his life. Victoria, there's something else you need to know about your husband. What? He works for Pinnacle Media Group, 32nd floor of this building. His office is directly above mine. For 2 years, we've been in the same building every day. I've been 5 floors below him, managing the property he works in, ensuring his job security, maintaining the infrastructure that supports his employment. Mr. Henderson, what are you saying? I'm saying your husband has been closer to his father than he realized. I'm saying the man he's been ashamed of has been protecting his livelihood every single day. 30 years of secrets were about to be revealed in one sentence. Friday afternoon, I walked to the 32nd floor of my own building for the first time in 30 years, as an owner, not as security. Margaret Collins had scheduled the tenant meeting for 3:30 p.m. Standard lease review, she'd told Pinnacle Media Group. Routine building management business. John was waiting in the conference room when I arrived. He looked up from his paperwork, saw me, and his face went through every emotion a person can experience in 5 seconds. Shock, recognition, fear, understanding, and finally something that looked like relief. Hi, John. Hi, Dad. Margaret tells me you've been requesting space upgrades. Better office, premium location, expanded square footage. Dad, I can explain. I'm sure you can, but first I want you to understand something. For 30 years, I've worked in this building. Every morning at 5:30, I arrived to ensure your workplace was safe, secure, and properly maintained. Every month, I reviewed tenant agreements to ensure your job security. Every day, I protected the investment that generates the money that's been supporting your lifestyle. John's voice was barely audible. I know, Dad, I've known for months. What you haven't known is why I never told you about the wealth. Why I kept working as head of security instead of sitting in an executive office. Why I wanted you to earn your own success before inheriting mine. Why? Because respect isn't inherited, John. It's earned. Because understanding the value of work comes from working, not from watching others work. Because becoming a man worth respecting requires making choices that demonstrate character, integrity, and genuine care for the people who've invested in your success. I handed him the modified trust fund documents. Your inheritance is still waiting for you, but it comes with new conditions. Demonstrate respect for family relationships. Show genuine appreciation for the work that built this wealth. Include the people who love you in the important moments of your life. John read through the documents slowly. When he looked up, his eyes were different. Older. More serious. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about the wedding, about being ashamed, about taking your money while excluding you from my life. John, respect isn't inherited, it's earned. But forgiveness? That's a choice, and I choose to give you the chance to earn both. If you've ever surprised someone who underestimated you, share your story below. Sometimes the people closest to us see us least clearly. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is the opportunity to discover who we really are.